Hi guys, I hope you all are doing okay. This is video 2 of 2. So if you haven't seen the first part, we are going through the lecture Writing a Literary Analysis. And you want to pick up on the first video. That way you can see and walk through the first 15 slides within this lecture. We're going to be picking up on slide 16. A couple of things to note here. At the top of next week, I'm going to be posting some resources for you guys. This is going to include sample essays of things that I'm looking at and things that I really want you to dig into. It's going to include a sample compare and contrast. And I'm also going to post a Sign Up Genius in case you guys want to have individual phone conferences with me so we can talk about your progress in the class at all, or just this last assignment, this last paper, which you guys will be creating. So look out for those things from me. They will be in there for Monday's class. We're picking up on slide 16, which is titled Setting. Setting is really interesting in Circes because if you'll remember from my setting lesson, setting is not just a geographic specification, it's also a time frame. And because Circes is immortal, she's a mythological figure, the time frame is really expanded and can be very, very impactful. So talking about how they handled so many years of Circes' life could be really, really interesting. And it can also go hand in hand with an essay on pacing. Slide 17 is another one of those charts where you can just break down time frames and concepts of development and see how Circe's life and evolution and what her trajectory was and how it was shaped by the setting overall. Again, I said in the first lecture that a really crucial turning point for Circes is when her sister calls her to deliver the Minotaur, and the things that she sees and the people that she meets in that moment have a huge impact on who the character will be by the end of the story. But again, that has a lot to do with the setting. The loom that Daedalus gives Circes becomes a permanent fixture in her home, and it's something that's commented on several times. So another great essay might be, how did that loom become impactful, and what did it represent overall to Circes to have it in her home and to continue to create with it? That could be something that's really interesting. Again, you can use these charts as your journal entries for the Circes entries that I've noted on your reading calendar, or you don't have to. It is completely and totally up to you. If you are going to really work on this and look at setting and how it is impactful, then you definitely want to see how the island kept Circe's son safe for all those years, because that definitely has an impact, and that has a lot to do with the setting itself. The point of view in Circes is so important. And in fact, in many ways, I think it was the point of why Miller decided to create this. So we've talked about first person, second person, third person, objective, limited, and omniscient. I did give you those definitions again on slide 18 if you want to do a brief recap of it. If you're going to do a paper on this, you'll want to not only identify what the point of view and the perspective was, but why it was chosen. So why was it necessary to write in that point of view? And how did that become an impactful part of the narrative itself? You know, the narrative really focuses on Circes while she, for a long time, is abandoned on the island and doesn't have anyone to interact with other than herself. So what was the author doing with that point of view? And do you think that that was the correct decision? Would be a really interesting paper. Analyzing a story certainly has to look at things like rhetorical elements. So when I'm saying rhetorical elements, I'm talking about foreshadowing, how the author builds suspense, what the author's attitude and tone is, and of course, above all, that crucial question that I ask when I look at any piece of literature: so what? Why did I have you read this? So you can definitely look at moments where Cersei is interacting with characters, you can definitely look at the foreshadowing, kind of her father's abandonment of his daughter and how she is kind of alone in these halls, how that foreshadows her abandonment on Ogawa and what that is going to look like. That could be a really interesting essay. How do they build suspense? You know, one way in which they use characters to build suspense within Cersei's is we have Hermes tell Cersei's that Odysseus is going to get shipwrecked on her island. Like, she knows that years in advance. How does that help to build suspense, especially since Odysseus is probably the character that we're the most familiar with from the Odyssey, of course. So look at all of those things when you're defining what is going to make a good and quality literary analysis. So mood, the climate, the time that it was published. This was just published last year. Many people think that this is kind of the age of feminism. So talking about Cersei's as a feminist work is a wonderful essay, and I think it could be beautifully done with the correct examples and by shedding the correct light. Symbols, how are certain things symbolic? What does the loom symbolize? What does the raft that the boys build and work on towards the end, what does that symbolize? What does the female lion symbolize? What does Cersei's witchcraft in general symbolize? You know, because that can have a more relevant and recent implication as well. So look at any of the symbolic elements that could make up this novel and could make it impactful. Remember, we're not just reading this novel for pleasure, even though I would go out on a limb and say that this is a pleasurable book to read. We're reading this novel to unpack what is its cultural impact. Why was it published now? You know, it's not the most timely of things, or is it? And looking at that and unpacking those symbols will help you to realize why I chose it for this course overall. Hopefully. You can also look at irony. There's a lot of irony throughout the entirety of Cersei's, throughout the entirety of the novel. One element of irony that I find really interesting is when Cersei goes to visit her sister and she really realizes that she's a better witch than her sister is. And she's better than her at something. She might be more beautiful, she might have a better life, but overall, Cersei's is better at her craft. And that is a huge ironic moment for her, especially considering the fact that her father and her mother never put any amount of faith or trust or value in who Cersei's was. Another really, really ironic point was when her brother comes and her brother just kind of completely abandons her after she's the one who has taken him and he would have been the abandoned child in the beginning. There's real irony in seeing him later in the text chasing after his daughter who has run amok and who has helped a hero trick him and fool him. So that would be a great essay as well, looking at moments of irony within the text. When you look at a literary work, you would be remiss not to look at similes, metaphors, alliteration. Think about the way the writer sat down to write this work. Right? A lot of time and effort goes into creating these works. And so what I'm asking you to do is really tell me what spoke to you in the novel Cersei's, and why did it speak to you, and how are you impacted by it? I told you guys that one of the important things that you need to do is create a critical interpretation of the text. So it's your responsibility within the introduction to have a thesis statement. You need to set the right tone. So within this class, we have talked very casually about literary works. This is not so much a casual discussion. One way to set the tone is to write in present tense. Another way is to really assume the correct audience. So you know that I'm going to be the one reading this. You know I have read and studied Circes. So you know that you don't necessarily have to break things down to the smallest particle for me. Don't focus on the minutia. Focus on your bigger ideas and connecting those ideas in order to have a more thorough understanding of the text itself, which I think you guys are very, very capable of. Write in the present tense, but also be wary of the word I. I don't want your language to get too formal, but you definitely want to be careful about how you're approaching your thesis, and you definitely want to make sure that it's A, something that can be understood, but B, something that is academically minded. So think about all those things. Try to be new, try to be original, try to talk about something that's significant, that's meaningful to you. Like I said, I read a lot of papers for reading Lolita and Tehran on the same topic, and I didn't mind that. Everyone did have a slightly different take, but I would love to see some new ideas that jumped out at you guys as you read Circes during this time and as you guys were home with your families. I would love to have conversations with each of you guys individually about some of those ideas that you might have as well. You can't create anything without starting with a text. So make sure that you're crafting everything that you do, that you're modifying your thesis, that you're working on it based on the text that you're seeing there. That is super, super important. I cannot stress that enough. Please read this. Please show me that you've read all of this. The last 5 pages might be the most impactful pages within the entire text. So get there. Get there. Make sure that you're reading all of it, that you're understanding all of it, that you're dissecting all of it. That's what your reading journals are for. I hope that you guys have utilized those so that you can create cohesive thesis statements. Some other things that you can use to support your thesis, and this is very important, you do need to have 2 other sources for this paper. So Circes will be source number 1 and 2 others. You can use any of the source material that I have sent you on Moodle, and I will give you the citation information for that because obviously that's not included within your scanned pages. So feel free to use Margaret Atwood or the original Odysseus text. I can give you those page numbers and citation information as well. You can also use other critics' opinion. Be careful going down that rabbit hole though. I don't want to see you verbatim just pulling somebody else's essay and using it as your own work. You can use historical or social context, direct quotes, summaries, paraphrases are of course things that you will want to do for this paper. Whenever you're writing the body of your paper, make sure that every argument you present is being supported. So your argument itself is like a floor in a house. It needs a foundation, it needs walls, it needs support beams. So everything that you say, make sure that you can back up 2 and 3 times over. You definitely don't want to get into a situation where you're ranting or where you're going on for long, extensive periods. Your conclusion shouldn't just be a wrap-up of what we read. You should try for some depth and some significance. Make sure that you are centering around your thesis, but you can step outside it slightly. Remember to organize your paragraphs around some centralized themes and to be supporting each theme that you come out with. Okay, that is the end of our literary analysis lectures. I hope you guys, if you didn't enjoy them, then I hope at least you got some kind of idea about what to do. Look out for some sample papers that I will be posting in upcoming days' files as well. Also look out for the Sign Up Genius. I hope to see you guys soon, and wash your hands.